Welcome back to Cheche, live on Citizen TV. The IBC is holding a national conference on election preparedness. And our guest this morning, constitutional lawyer Catherine Muma and Mule Musau of the Observer Group ELOG have been participating in the deliberations, contributing their expertise to ensure what we all hope will be a credible, peaceful election, the IB says, with a legitimate and acceptable outcome. And so before the break, we had started getting into the area of the legal framework, and you were making the point, Catherine, that we seem to have the best laws around elections, model laws, you were saying, but for some reason the actors, institutions are not executing their mandate. Now, why is that?
One, we have anybody who reads the Constitution can say we actually have a fairly good framework for exercising the right to vote and for conducting elections. That Constitution has then required Parliament to put in place other laws, and we have the Elections Act, the IBC Act. We have regulations under that. So the legal environment exists for proper elections. I was going to come to that. Now, I served in the CAC, and the laws that we churned, we actually made the laws that facilitated this process. I must say that much as the laws are good, they may not be 100% good because of the self-interest factor. Parliament is the one passing these laws, and we've always had an issue of self-interest. One of the issues, for instance, was when we set minimum standards of who should be an MCA, who should be an MP. And because of self-interest, they had members who did not meet those standards. They actually colluded and removed that. There is the issue of campaign financing. We have a Campaign Financing Act. We didn't implement it in 2013. We have not implemented it in 2017. Why? Because Parliament chooses to suspend that instead of, and yet that's a key factor in terms of campaign financing, the monies, and all of that. So we have institutions with mandate to facilitate actually tinkering with these laws. Parliament is one of the institutions that is actually manipulating legislation and regulations to suit themselves, which is not good. So fairly, I mean, if you look at the laws that we have, they are, I would say, despite what I have just said about Parliament, we generally have the general law conducive. But when it comes to implementing, every time an institution tries to implement, you find that those with self-interest might tweak an issue, a law to actually take away whatever obstacle they perceive is placed in that law. Cohesion Commission, for instance, keeps telling us their hands are tied. They cannot interpret hate speech. And yet we've been there for the last, they said that before 2013. We've had 5 years of a Parliament which should be defining hate speech in very clear manner in order to prepare for 2017. And Kaparo will tell you in 2017 my hands are tied. Now, that in my view is not about the law. It's about the holders of those offices, the individuals, being difficult about putting in place integrity laws, putting in place the laws that should facilitate us to stop some of the things that are going on. So we have laws that are being manipulated all the time. Some of the regulations that we have that IEBC put in place, for instance, regulations for facilitating campaigns for party lists, elections for party lists, came out in April of this year. An institution has 5 years to plan. In 2013, the IEBC did not have a framework or regulations to facilitate party list nominations. And as a result of that, this was done very haphazardly. You know, there were people who are nominated to Parliament who do not represent interest groups. Now, IBC was taken to court, spent more than 200 million Kenya shillings on the cases just around the first on the party list. I've not talked about all the other issues. Now, you would have expected, with that experience, we should have had regulations around party lists way before 2015, if you ask me. But we have those regulations were being passed in March, April. In March, April.
But before the IBC, they had internal turmoil. They were fighting to, well, the previous IBC was fighting to preserve its life, you know, the commissioners rather, and then we had to, you know, get them out, and then, you know, new commissioners were sworn in.
Were they fighting all the while?
The question is, where does the mandate lie? Does it lie with the commission or the secretariat, as far as policy formulation and frameworks are concerned?
And not even that. I mean, when I'm looking at this legal framework, you know, if you look at the election cycle, legal framework is the first of those cycles. Once we finish an election, once an election is over, it is from the issues which we are raising from that election that now we sit down and reform the legal process framework. And that is supposed ideally to come in the first 2 years. I don't think in the first 2 years those fights were even there. In fact, one of the, I think for me, one of the frustrations of the political class in terms of that particular IBC is seeing that we are 3 years down the line and quite a number of things have not happened. Remember, this national conference, for instance, for elections had been called earlier, even after that, after the 2013 elections. In 2014, we need to have a national conference to discuss the issues which are emanating from that election and to see what action therefore needs to be taken. Planning is at that stage. Now, it is against best practices, for instance, to be able to interfere with the legal framework in the last election year, because there's no sobriety around that time. Parliament is not sober, and we've seen the issues about the campaign finance and what Catherine alluded to, party hopping and all those things. The commission is, you know, as a logistical operation, election comes secondly only to war. So you can imagine the kind of things that the secretariat right now is running around trying to do. At the same time, it still wants to fight on a battle in terms of the way the final tallying center going to happen in terms of the judicial process or legal process. You have just too much on your hands around this time, and things cannot work out as coherently as you would expect. And therefore, I agree that we shouldn't be talking about legal issues and legal framework issues around this particular time. The laws are there, we have them, they need to be interpreted, and the institutions which are in charge of ensuring we follow those laws should actually be acting.
Actually, we put them in place in 2012.
Yes.
Right. The CICN team.
Yes.
So the only thing that IBC should have done is, after 2013, what lessons have we learned? That
which they did
in terms of what do we need to tweak, in terms of which regulation, where didn't we do this fine? And that should have happened.
Do you blame this on self-interest? And if so, then where does the independence of these institutions lie?
I don't know about there is self-interest of Parliament. And yesterday I said that when you read Article 88, it gives the mandate of regulation of the electoral process to the IBC. Now, what we've done is that we've decided that all regulations must be approved by Parliament. And in my view, we need to rethink that for purposes of the elections. Why should we rethink this?
So the IBC has outsourced that responsibility to
Parliament. To Parliament. And because it has outsourced to Parliament, it will tell you that we had the regulations for party lists were ready in January 2016 or something, but it's Parliament that's holding them. That's the excuse they'll give. They'll throw it to Parliament. Now my question is, if that is your constitutional mandate, can you go telling people that it's elsewhere? We need to come to the realization that Parliament is a player in this game, and it is taking over the role of the umpire to try and manipulate the rules of that game. And we need to decide, when it comes to regulation, particularly where it is an express issue around campaign financing, the IBC should make those regulations, should actually take the lead, involve Parliament and stakeholders in a participatory manner. And once stakeholders have agreed on regulations, they should gazette them so that they have become applicable. But if we leave it to Parliament, they decide now this is going to disadvantage us, let us
uphold it.
Let us hold it. Let us do away with
So
it.
is this an issue, therefore, of self-interest, incompetence, lack of confidence, or are we just seeing a mix?
In fact, I was going to say IEBC is established by the Constitution, not by Parliament. So it's high time they realize that and delinked themselves, because they keep behaving as if they're a child of Parliament. And when Parliament bullies them, they just take it. They're independent, they have security of tenure, and they must delink and decide this is what the Constitution says, this is what we should be doing, and this is what we implement. Mupende musi, and whether you are opposition or government, this is what we're supposed to do, and we will remain neutral. And my view is that if they do that, for as long as if they're not faithful to the Constitution, somebody will challenge that in a very objective manner. But once they start subjecting themselves to the machinations of the politicians, then they will be managed politically. And that's what has happened. They are now being managed politically because they chose to not to assert their independence.
Would you give the IEBC credit for anything?
Oh yes. I mean, there is they put they're actually trying to put things in place. No. By the way, the team that has just come in from was it December? They've been in place for 6 months, but as a result of all that has gone on, we have had a few. You have a timetable that is now clear. The transparency is starting to come out. It could be better. But I think they're realizing they need the best way to deal is to have everything on the table. They're trying to do that.
I think I support this.
Yes. So all is not lost, and I think we will have something. But they're dealing with a backlog of things that should have happened when they were not there, that have not happened, and which they're trying to do in the short time.
One of the complaints about the operations of IBC is the judiciary. They are like when they were doing some registration or whatever, they were saying postpone. You have a budget to do voter registration. The court say no, you won't. You have to proceed. You have a budget. Then there is timetable also. Do you think the judiciary has been a hindrance?
Not at all. Not at all. The IBC must first look at the Constitution. What does the Constitution say? There shall be continuous voter registration. So you cannot come up with a deadline that takes away the right of a person when the Constitution has clearly provided for that.
Until the Constitution.
So Umtata was absolutely right when he went to court on this matter. And if they had, as IBC, done just a tabular, what is the requirement, the constitutional requirement, therefore how do we plan around this? You will tell people for mass registration we will stop at this time, for continuous registration you will actually factor all of those issues so that people know our right do not stop around this issue. You cannot take a budgetary issue and say it takes away a constitutional right. No.
What about procurement? They have been having problems with their systems of procurement to the extent that people are wondering actually whether they know what they're doing. What is the issue there now?
Why would they have a problem with procurement? The procurement law in Kenya is very clear. You know what the steps are. If we need to have this cap by December and the procurement steps are 15, what do we need to do when in order for us to have that cap by December? How did they do that?
So what's the issue? I think some of the issues which are the areas we may not blame really the IBC wholesomely, because I think even in terms of the procurement, there's a procurement law in this country which supersedes all other processes in terms of procurement within a public institution. But when you look at the September laws and then the Christmas amendments around the Elections Act, there are quite a number of things which were messed up in terms of timelines, and some of them are affecting how the IBC was conducting itself. So first, of course, imagine from what Catherine Adalia said, that there are people who are tweaking, or Parliament especially has been tweaking things according to their own self-interest without due consideration, and therefore putting sometimes the IBC on the spot. But that said, still the planning process is a process which is supposed to be happening way before, and that's why I'm saying we had a planning stage. Some of these things are, elections is the same.
I'm looking at the election cycle. It's turning out very funny. You say the first thing should be
the legal
framework. Now we are in between voter registration and voter education, and we are bringing in legal framework
in April.
We shouldn't be talking about anywhere about legal frameworks around this time. And I've had a conversation with IEBC because. And Catherine is very right when he says, you know, you need to preempt the things the litigation which may be coming, and you need to look at your entire laws and ask yourselves, what are the actions I could do which could lead in a country which is litigious like ours, especially now, what are the things I may do that may send us back to the courts and therefore even delay my timelines even a little bit further. Legal framework was the first thing. The second of the cycle actually is planning and training. And that is the second part of that cycle. Again, that's supposed to have been done in the early stages of the election cycle itself. So this issue about right now we're being caught up by this. That's why the fall goes straight to IEBC as the manager. And let me just say one more thing about independence. We model our commission and our management, our EMB, as an independent model.
Electoral management body.
Yes, because we don't trust government and we don't trust parliament to do these things. In the West, there are very many of the election management bodies are actually located within government.
The executive,
Yes, within the executive. Because they trust the processes which are there. In most sub-Saharan countries, most of the third world countries where there is very low degree of trust in terms of transparency, in terms of what happens within government, we don't want that to be located inside there. And therefore, what Catherine was saying that the commission must take its full responsibility as an independent authority outside the framework of the government and stand by its own ground, because it is grounded on the constitution of the country, and ensure that the process is managed in their terms, not on the terms of the politicians. But when you play yourself to a place where, a level where the politicians can be able to interfere with these, you know, the regulations about finance, which are supposed to be some of the best thing which came to the country in terms of regulation of finance, campaign finance, you know, you're leaving it to parliament to make a decision. You're telling people who have been, you know, consolidating war chests over the last 5 years through whatever sources they get their money from, campaign war chests. You're telling them, don't use this money now. It's going to be a fair ground for everybody. They will not accept those things because they're the ones who are passing.
So what do we make, therefore, you know, because we're talking about the IBC, trust, voter confidence, this Ipsos poll released earlier this year that said that confidence in the IBC had increased, but there were disparities based on region, so that Jubilee strongholds expressed more confidence in the IBC, and opposition-leaning areas reported less confidence.
To me, that's a fair reflection of the situation, in the sense that the IEBC commissions, the one that left in was it November?
Yeah.
Clearly, there was no confidence in it, particularly from the opposition. And if you ask me, the process that got them out was more political than it was legal. And that's why I say, if you play politics, you will actually get out politically. So it was more, they got out, and at that time, of course, the confidence in the institution was low. Then the new team came in, and as usual, we are suspicious of each other. People were not too sure, and everybody was who was which man, who's which. I think all of them were profiled on who brought in who, which we unfairly do. When people are appointed into office. But as they have come up, I think there is a mixture. There are instances when you've had even the opposition say they think they will do something good, and then of course they get into a tiff with them on something else, like the procurement is an issue. So
but then you see a pattern emerging where when the IBC finds itself in trouble, they seem to have support from the Jubilee side and, you know, criticism from the opposition.
But that's how the way it has been. The president and his team supported the Isaac team. 100%. So his followers will do the same. I think
it is important also for IBC to manage perceptions out there in terms of how they go about their issues. If, you know, we are a very divided nation, The Ipsos poll is supported by another poll which was conducted by South Consulting, which just released the report much more in-house to a number of stakeholders about a month ago, which showed the same patterns, that where you have low confidence levels in the management of the election processes, it is the areas where certain political persuasions lie. So, and where there is more confidence, so it's the same story which is still emerging, but the IBC as a manager must also understand that we are a divided nation, and therefore how they play their ball, they must be perceived as being neutral. I like the fact that Chebukati has really gone out of his way to endear himself to all the political divide. That is tried as much as possible. Yesterday, for instance, we were expecting the president to come to the conference where the opposition leader was there. So there is a way that they're making, approaches to both sides of the divide, which is a very good thing, because if the opposition indicate that they have confidence in how things are being managed, and if the government side also shows the same, you can those polls. The survey can overturn overnight. There's a perceptions change in this country are very fluid because of political persuasions.
These perceptions, are they as a result of not fully involving all the stakeholders, or what's happening? Take the case of the procurement for the printing of the ballot papers now. Is it that they were not fully involved?
Our advice has always been that for all the process, because of perception issues and because of the trust deficit that we've had, that every time IBC is about to engage something, it is important to call all the stakeholders to be part of the process and to explain why they have to do certain things. Even when they have to do single sourcing for one reason or the other, let that be a process which through a consultation or a number of stakeholders, and once they are agreed, because nobody wants to delay. I can assure you the opposition does not want to delay this election beyond August. Neither does the government. Nobody, there may be a particular self-interest, but I think there's one area where we are nearly all united that we do not want this election going beyond that particular date, and therefore if we involve quite a number of the critical stakeholders into the processes of engaging, whether it's about procurement or it's about the voter verification process, I think that gives you some level of stability in terms of how to handle the issues. Some of the issues about the legal, litigation issues, call the stakeholders, talk to them, have a sit-in, say, these are how we are looking at this thing. What are your views about this thing? Catherine will give her input, Okiya Mtata will give his input, and people will be able to agree on the table before this out-of-court settlement.
I thought that's the reason why they are having this conference.
Yeah, of course.
The conference is around.
I don't think the conference would resolve all of those issues. But the conference is good in terms of giving feedback on what's happening, and I think they're getting that feedback. I was going to make the point that respect is earned, it's not conferred. So respect to the IBC will not be conferred either by Raila or Uhuru. They must actually earn it, and they will earn it from what they do, how they conduct themselves, so that whether it's Raila or the president, if you start pointing fingers and the people believe IBC is doing the right job, they will actually earn their respect. So they need to do that. The other thing I was going to say, I think 80%, possibly 90% of the litigation would not have happened if the planning had been properly been executed.
Panelists, I'll solicit your opinions now, because the question we've been asking our viewers, and they have been sending us their thoughts, is whether the IBC is ready, and unfortunately the feeling is that they're not quite ready. But my question to you is, are we as Kenyans ready to accept polls even if they are credibly delivered? Because remember, earlier in the program, we're hearing about the way we behave, that there is suspicion, that we're always looking for, who brought you your last name and this, that, the other. So, are we as Kenyans, have we changed our behavior? Are we ready to accept results?
At the beginning, Mule talked about social nuances, and I'll keep referring to that. And clearly, one of the examples he gave is that if it's not my person who has won, then it's not free and fair. That's where we start from. So the fact that the nation is such a polarized society is a fact that we cannot wash aside. So it all goes back to what the institution mandated by the Constitution to run this election does is what will help define. And we've had case studies. 2002, what happened? I mean, it is the same body that 5 years earlier had been condemned, and 5 years later was being taken to the gallows. So we have come through this process. The institutions
not
mandated
2002, 2007. 2002.
No, 2002. Everybody in Kenya accepted the results conducted by ECK.
Yeah.
The same ECK 5 years earlier had been condemned. 5 years later in 2007 were being taken to the gallows.
Yeah.
I mean, social nuances.
And so, and equally so, the Isaac Hasas-led commission at the
referendum.
Yeah.
Remember the referendum?
Level was very high. It was the same one we were bundling out last.
Yes.
This commission is new. There are people who are saying, okay, the commission is new.
No, my question to you is voter behavior. Are we prepared as Kenyans to accept the results of elections?
And I think we will have no choice unless we want to fight. We will have no choice but to accept.
Is this an accept and move on response?
You know, that's the worst situation we can find ourselves in. I'll give you the example of the media. After 2007, everybody was bashing the media. In 2013, the media knew there are certain faults, and the country was not prepared for the elections. The machines had failed in the test period, but they couldn't bring it out for fear of being condemned and being told you are the people who polarized the country.
Yeah. Catherine?
I think the results will be acceptable depending on what we're able to do in the circumstances. And in my view, two things need to be done to try and boost the confidence of Kenyans. We must bring to the conclusion the cleaning up of the register in a very participatory manner, so that every stakeholder says, yes, now this is the register we are going to use. That we must do. And the IEBC must go out of its way, if it means employing people 24/7 in shifts to deliver that in the shortest time possible. We must do that. Second, we must immediately do the testing of the DVR equipment, the voting equipment. We must do that mass testing and actually give a clear time plan on what are the possible failure issues, challenges, what are the risks, and what have we put in place to mitigate those risks. We just don't want to hear the statement of Chebukati on it.
That they failed.
No, he actually says we are prepared. No, we actually need to be told the possibilities of the risks are A, B, C, D, the ones that we know, to a team that is from all over, a team of experts, IT experts that can say, yes, this is it, and should this happen, this is what we intend to do. In very simple language, to tell Kenyans this is how this is going to work. Those two things need to be clearly sorted. Of course, there is the issue of how to declare results, which is before the courts, and which we may not be.
There is also issue of transmission.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Broadly, I think I totally agree with what Catherine is saying. But broadly, I'm still saying that how IBC conducted itself between now and the August 8 elections is a major determinant of acceptability of results. The other is credibility. That if the conduct is therefore credible in terms of transparency, in terms of testing, as Catherine said, making sure that everything is in place. They have made their attempts, because I don't think they are going to get everything 100%, but they make the attempt, and this National Election Conference is a very good start. Make the attempt by August 8 that we have attempted to try to clean up that register to the best of our ability. We have tried to ensure that the systems are in place. We have ensured that the training of the staff is being conducted above board, and everybody is in the picture of what is going on. The chances, and then you buy in, because that one leads to a buy-in from all the candidates. You get a buy-in from the opposition, you get a buy-in from the government side. That will lead us to a process where we can be able to say these results look credible, we can be able to accept them. Of course, the nuances that I was still talking about may still hang over somewhere, but there is a political aspect in terms of selling this or selling this idea to both sides of the divide. And let me give you a very good example as I wind up. Remember the question about the tallying, the final tallying center, not the final tallying, but the question of doing parallel tabulation. When IBC stepped in, because that was nearly a powder keg of sorts. It was going to erupt because we had already seen both sides of the divide started to talk with different tongues. But when Chebukati stepped in and said, you know what, according to where we stand, there is actually no law against anybody tallying the result from wherever. The only thing is that allow us to declare the results. It was very clear, and there's some calm which came. And just the other day, you had the president also saying, and yet they had already taken aside that particular time. They already coming out to say we are going to have ours also across the country. So that is a pacifying intervention, and we want to see that kind of pacification in this process throughout and being managed, but not by any other actor, but by IBC.
But is IBC itself intact? Is it one team, or are there problems there? Perception again.
We have had issues about wrangles. I think, and I've even spoken to Ichebugati about this. Please do not allow any, fissures or any cracks in terms of your team to be seen out to the public. Whatever happens, I mean, within every institution there are always internal issues, but IBC cannot afford at this time to be seen that they are working from different scripts, whether the commission or the secretariat or vice versa.
All right, so we'll take a break now, and this is Cheche, which you're watching on Citizen TV. Send us your thoughts on whether the IBC is ready for the general election. Our SMS number is 22422. You can reach us on Twitter using the hashtag Cheche.